which means it's a lot harder for you to get behind a book if you can't relate to or understand the main protagonist in some way. Which is, I know that you all said it was the density of the text, but I do think that is another reason why it does make it hard for a lot of people of our generation to understand to or relate to Hester Prynne.
It's the Intersectional Podcast, Episode 5. I'm your host, Fahim Kamal.
I'm your other host, Brandon Winchell.
I'm your other host, Lily Remington.
And I'm your final host, Karina Provost.
Yeah, so when we were coming up with the topic of today's podcast, we were looking back at some of the conversations that we just randomly had, while we were talking as friends. And one in particular that came up was just about reading. Like why people like it, why people dislike it, what things people like to read, and like what motivates people to read. And so, out of all of us, Karina seems to be the one who likes reading the most and who does the most reading. So, for today's podcast, we're going to put her in charge of leading a conversation.
Yeah, so I love reading. I really like reading. I read all the time. I have 2 bookshelves in my room, and then there's 2 like really large bookshelves in my family office. And I've read nearly every book that we have. But I just kind of wanted to start out today's episode by like asking my fellow podcast hosts like some personal thought questions and some personal habit questions about reading that I think a lot of people could probably relate to in terms of why they don't find reading interesting anymore as they grow older, or like the reasoning behind that, and maybe what you guys can start doing to try reading more if you're interested. So the first thing that I kind of wanted to ask you guys was, what was the last thing you read or like remember reading that was not for school?
Yeah, so the last thing I remember reading is, I don't even remember the last thing I remember reading. It's been that long that I don't freely read. So I guess that answers that question.
So
Making my point.
I've not read in a while, but I started reading recently because on my birthday I wanted to get a couple books that I feel like would be important. So I actually read, I don't think I read today. I read yesterday night. I was reading Animal Farm. I haven't finished it, even though it's like 80 pages. I still have a couple chapters to go, but yesterday. But before then, before my birthday, it had been a while.
So the last book I finished reading was called Demian by Hermann Hesse, but I'm currently reading this book called Manhunt, The 12-Day Chase for Lincoln's Killer by James L. Swanson. I feel like compared to Fahim and Brandon, I'm more like Karina in the sense that actually prior to like school closures and all that, I didn't really read that much just because I didn't have that much time on my hands, or I just like, because when I read a book, I get super like immersed in it, and so like during the school year to have to like stop to pause for like doing homework and stuff, so like I don't really read over during the school year, but I mean with the school closures I've been reading a lot more.
Awesome. So I'm also just going to answer the question that myself. The last book I read, which I actually finished 2 days ago, was On Liberty by John Stuart Mill, which is a nonfiction book. I don't think I've read a fiction book since the 10th grade. But yeah, I actually got these book recommendations of the ones that I'm currently reading. And so the next one that I'm starting today actually is Creating Capabilities by Martha Nussbaum. I got these recommendations from our IB literature teacher, so I recommend them to everybody because honestly they're incredible books and they're really eye-opening. So yeah, that is the last thing I read in the book that I am currently starting. I guess this question is more for Brandon and Fahim rather than Lily, because Lily is still reading. Um, why do you guys personally think that you started to read less?
Mm, I feel like I'll guess I'll go first because Fahim, you seem to be thinking. But reading to me, especially fiction, because nonfiction, I feel like there's more like instant, like, oh, this makes sense, and there's not as much like nuance to reading it, and it just like makes more sense right off the bat. But fiction to me, I feel like school might have played a part in like the reasons why I don't like it, because a lot of the time when we read fiction, I just don't understand, and a lot of the topics like they pick for us to read fiction on just aren't interesting to me. And overall, I feel like that kind of like corrupted what I like to read, because I just started associating all of like fiction with like that category of school books that we are required to read, and it's just like I feel like that had the biggest impact in terms of why I started to read less.
And then in that case, how did you feel about the AP Lang like course reading? Because we had to read two nonfiction books for that.
AP Lang, I feel like was a little different. Like I said, I feel like the nonfiction books to me are a little bit more interesting because it's just like, oh, I get the knowledge right away. I don't have to do any other like super critical thinking on the topic, so it's easier for me to understand the book, so I feel more enjoyment from them. So I feel like the books we read in that class, especially like the new Jim Crow, I feel like that book was like really interesting to me, especially because it's about like stuff that's happening right now and like modern issues that we need to address as a society, and I feel like those things just like intrigued me more than like certain fiction things we've read in other English classes.
Right. Of course. Fahim?
Yeah, so I guess the reason why I don't like reading as much was because, like, you know, when you're reading this passage and it's describing like the background, right? But it's like 3 pages or like 2 pages describing the background, right? And I just get so into it, and I'm just like, at the end, I don't know what I've read, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
got really turned off of fiction for that reason, just because it's just like I couldn't do it anymore. It just wasn't what I wanted when I read.
Mm-hmm.
So like
You
I think
would
I could resonate with Brandon when he was talking about how he wants the knowledge, right? I think the knowledge gain I when I go to read a book, right? My
Yeah.
purpose is to gain the knowledge that this book supposedly wants to, give the message, right? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's more deliberately and more easily accessed through nonfiction books, which is why I'd rather read a nonfiction book.
you would hate Stephen
Okay.
King novels.
um, does Lily want to tackle the question, or
Well, I
are
mean,
you?
I guess I kind of touched on it, just saying like for me, like I just get so immersed in like books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I guess I like both because I like the feeling, I guess, of imagining another world that's not our own. So I just, or even nonfiction, I just get so immersed in like the story and the knowledge that I'm gaining from the book that like during the school year, I'm like, I just want to like sit and read the book and like not stop. But with school, like when I'm in school, I have so many other things going on that I I I'll open the book, read a chapter, and then probably not open it again for like a week because I just don't have time. And then by the time I open the book again, I've forgotten everything. So I just like don't really read during the school year, but whenever we have breaks, I just go ham and read all the books.
All right. And then I just kind of want to like close out my little interview section thing with like which of your guys' school assigned books were your favorites to read? Like which ones did you actually find yourself enjoying, and which ones did you read all the way through?
Not the Scarlet Letter. I'll tell you that for
Definitely not the
sure.
Scarlet Letter.
I
That
don't.
was a boring bleep book.
I'll let you guys answer because I can't think. I need a second. Hmm.
Yeah, I think my favorite one was the new Jim Crow. It really opened me up to mass incarceration in the United States currently, and it was a really easy read with a lot of the descriptive evidence needed to like talk to people about the issue. So it was a really good introduction to the topic.
Hmm.
Okay,
I guess
kind
I
of
could.
on that note, I just kind of wondering, do you think you liked the new Jim Crow because you got to choose it?
That was definitely an element in it as well. Like I feel like a lot of the school books don't really resonate with what I want to read
The
about. So
required
having
readings.
that choice was really a good factor in
Hmm.
And
me
then
liking
for
it.
you personally, yeah, like for you personally, um do you find interest in what you have to read for debate?
Yeah, for sure. I really like what we're reading right now. It's like the topic for this year has to do with the criminal justice system. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what we're reading is right now is about the abolitionist practice, and like that stuff is interesting to me. So I like reading about it.
Awesome.
I guess I'll go now, because I hadn't answered. But I guess I wasn't thinking about the new Jim Crow because the fact that we like got to pick, so I didn't like think about it like that. But that was probably my favorite. For the same reasons like Fahim said, it was just like easy to read and just like understand like what it was saying. But if I had to pick a fiction book, probably Brave New World.
You
Yeah,
know, I
so
haven't read that one.
Oh, you
I
haven't?
No.
really,
It's kind of like 1984, if you've read that.
Oh, yeah, no, I
Similar,
read
like
that.
dystopian sort of like
The
setting.
dystopian vibes.
Yeah.
yeah. So if I had to choose, well, okay, so I've actually I read all the books that we were assigned in school all the way through, but that doesn't mean I enjoyed them. My
Mhm.
favorite fiction
Right.
book, I agree with Brandon. I would probably say it was Brave New World,
Yeah.
or mm, I mean, I liked Of Mice and Men and I liked the Odyssey, but I don't know if I could read the Odyssey, like the full Odyssey all the
Yeah.
way through.
I could see why.
But I mean, I just like ancient Greek and Roman
Hmm.
like culture and all that. So that's probably why I enjoyed that. But out of the two like nonfiction books we had to read for school, I picked Outliers for AP Lang, but I don't think I actually. It was an interesting book, but it's all the things that they list as for why people are outliers isn't entirely factual. Not that it's not factual, but like there's just like I read some things online saying that like the book isn't the most like accurate or whatever, so that kind of like changed my perception of it, I guess. And then for the How Children Succeed that we had to read, I guess I like the message of the book saying like, oh, it's not just test scores that determine whether or not a child like it's about the circumstances they grew up in, but I just hated the author so much. I could not stand reading that book. I'm sorry. But yeah, those are my favorites.
It's okay. It's okay. Um, so, my personal favorites in terms of books that we read, uh, I think I made it very clear to our 10th grade English class that I love The Great Gatsby.
Hmm.
I
I
forgot about that one. I loved The Great Gatsby. Oh my
I
gosh.
adore The Great Gatsby. It was one of my favorite books before it was assigned to us in class,
Hmm.
and it's one of the few pieces of like classic American fiction that I think I find myself enjoying. Um, and I know so many people who don't actually like The Great Gatsby.
I
So many people.
I wasn't. I don't know if I didn't like it. I feel like I was indifferent to The Great Gatsby, but it wasn't my favorite.
It wasn't like a particular affection for the book, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think I have to say, and I'm sorry to all of the Mark Twain fans out there, that my least favorite was Huck Finn. I think I actually
Really.
enjoyed the Scarlet Letter more than I enjoyed Huck Finn.
Really. I
No,
thought.
that's cap.
I thought Huck
No
Finn
way.
was. I thought Huck Finn
I
was like decently interesting.
Better than the
I
Scarlet Letter, at least.
I think reading the Scarlet Letter was the problem because the language that Nathaniel Hawthorne uses and his freaking page-long sentences, that was a little much. But I kind of want to say I agree with Karina, but I might be biased because when we had to read Huck Finn, I was like, there were other things going on, so I was just like not a happy camper. And reading that book, I was like, this ain't it.
So the density in which Hawthorne writes the Scarlet Letter doesn't bother me. Never has bothered me. The
Really,
language that he used, the length of his sentences. I mean, it
really.
was not. The thing is, it's not hard for me to read because I'm acclimated to text like that. Like I have read so much stuff out of that time period.
That's
Like
fair.
um it's not just exclusive to the Scarlet Letter for me. So, I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Common Sense by Thomas Paine. This is kind of kind of different. It's a little bit irrelevant, but it's like if you think about the time period in which it was written, because like this was written in 1776 for crying out loud. I really think that it's just like acclamation to the style of language, and also I was like really interested in the story, and I don't want to spoil it in case anybody hasn't read it and wants to read it. But like I thought like the twists and turns of the Scarlet Letter, despite how long and drawn out that were more they were just more interesting to me. Like Pearl was more interesting to me as a character than Huck Finn.
I I barely remember anything that happened in either of them, if I'm gonna be honest.
Wasn't like
But
the main character's name like Hester or something?
Hester
Yeah.
Prynne, something like that.
Hester Prynne,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, like you were saying, I'm not acclimated to the language at all, and I hate, absolutely hate writing. Actually, writing in it isn't as bad, but I hate reading like such dense texts because it's just so hard for me to like stay focused at times because I just think it's so hard to like understand like what these words mean and words that I don't hear like all the time. And then when it's like more common language, kind of how like Twain wrote Huck Finn, it's just easier for me to like understand and thus the story, even though it's not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
like the same as the language, the story becomes easier for me to understand like
Right.
that.
Do you think that your like ability to like understand a book makes it more enjoyable for you?
Oh, definitely.
And just kind of like going off of that, do you think that if a book is like hard for you to understand, or if you have to put in extra research or work to understand a book, that it would turn you away from reading it?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
Ah,
Interesting.
yes, the laziness of teenagers kicks in.
Hey. Hey.
It's
Dang.
all of us. It's not just you. It's all of us. It is a lot
Yeah.
of people.
I try my best to look up words I don't know and look up things I don't know and go that extra step. But sometimes when it's just like so many times throughout the book, it just makes me like I just want to get through this book. I don't want to have to do all this extra stuff to read the book that's like just already dense on these pages. It's already that long. Plus the extra
Well,
work. It just like turns me off to the book, I guess.
but would you say that only really happens when it's a book that you have to read for school? Like, for example, if it was a book that you chose to read, but there was like words that you didn't know because it was on like a topic maybe you're interested in, but you don't really know too much about, so you have to kind of look up a lot of base knowledge. But in that case, it would be fine. What do you say?
It would probably be better. I don't know if I would say it's like necessarily fine. Again, I think it depends too on if it's
Mm,
fiction or nonfiction. If it's nonfiction, that's not as big of a deal to me because like I read nonfiction knowing that I'm probably gonna like not understand some of the concepts they're like bringing out. But with fiction, sometimes if it's just such like old writing or it's like such dense writing, it just makes me like, what is going on? And I just like even if it's something I wanted to read or like I thought I wanted to read, having to put in that extra work just like it's something that just makes me discouraged, I guess.
Also, I feel
Right.
like when you're reading fiction, like as you read, you become more like enveloped in it, more
Mm-hmm.
interested in it. So if there's such a like I don't know the word, like if there's such an impediment to getting that enjoyment, like you're less likely to want to read it more. Whereas like in nonfiction, you're probably somewhat acquainted to the topic, so you know already if you're interested or not. So it's not like that happens earlier in
mm.
fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Right.
actually kind of have to agree with that. Like when I was a kid, in like the second grade, I really wanted to read Harry Potter, but I got to the first book and I had no idea what a cloak was. And that's kind of like a central theme in Harry Potter with this freaking invisibility cloak. And I'm like, what the heck is a cloak? So then I just put the book down and I never read it again.
I know my brother read all of those. I never got into them. I remember I read probably the first and second pages of the first Harry Potter book, probably like at least probably more than five times, trying to understand what it said and trying to think about like how I would like get into this book, and then I just never ended up reading it because I just kept setting it down after I got discouraged, and then I just kept rereading, and I'm like, nah, I'm not doing this ever.
Yeah, I did actually start them, I think in maybe the second or third grade, and I was so, I believe that I started reading them the year The Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out, and I was so sad to have that spoiled for me.
No!
I hate when people do that, even with, like, stuff that's not books, like movies. It's so annoying.
Because then I later read Harry Potter, and my mom read it. And she spoiled the end for me, and I was so mad.
Oh, no.
I'm low-key jealous of people who read the Harry Potter. I felt like they had clout in, like, elementary school. I read the Harry Potter, talking about it with the teacher. I'm like, what are you guys talking about?
Okay,
like,
but
I want to be in on this conversation.
To be fair, I remember there was this kid in my second grade class, and he had, like, in AR, how there was, like, the colored stamps.
The dots?
Yeah. So he was, like, at the purple or black, which was, like, at the top.
Yeah.
And so he, on his desk, had, like, the 6th Harry Potter book or something, the Half-Blood Prince. And so then later when I was reading that book, I'm like, there's no way a second grader was reading this book and comprehending what was going on. Like, he probably just had the book on the desk for clout.
And then for popularity.
Bro, facts. And then my mom, she really liked Harry Potter. And so we would watch the movies. And so then my brother would go to school and take the AR test solely based on the movie. And so he was like, yeah, I read he would pass. And he's like, yeah, I read Harry Potter. I'm like, no, you didn't. Everyone is lying.
That's funny.
Sorry.
Oh my god.
Yeah, speaking of, sorry, this is going to be another tangent. Speaking of Harry Potter, my 4th grade teacher, her whole room was decorated based on Harry Potter. There was 4 groups of tables, each was like a house of Harry Potter, and I never read it, so like I didn't really understand it, but I always thought it was like pretty cool. And then in the end, like, she would like count up like how many, like, I don't know, if it wasn't jelly beans, it was like some like point system. And at the end, like, I was Slytherin and we were winning, and then Gryffindor won. And then I just like heard that's like what happened in the books, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. But it's just like interesting at the time about Harry Potter.
That is pretty much
it was
what
rigged
happened.
from the start. You just didn't know it in 4th grade.
I know.
Bro, but like, imagine, I mean, I know I personally am a Ravenclaw. I don't know if this means anything to any of you. But
Me
like,
too, Karina.
Like, literally, the Ravenclaws never get anything. And it's just...
We get
It
Luna.
hurts.
I think
And
I
everyone
might
just
have
thinks
taken
she's
a
weird.
test one time because someone wanted me to, and I think I might have got Hufflepuff, but I'm not
Makes
sure.
sense.
Makes sense.
Honestly,
What does Hufflepuff
I could
mean?
see...
That's such a horoscope.
I could see Brandon... I could honestly see Brandon as a Hufflepuff or a Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I'll take it.
It means you're, like, kind.
Yeah, I thought Hufflepuff people were, like, nice. Is what...
Yeah, Hufflepuffs are nice and loyal, and I can't remember all the Hufflepuff traits right now.
Sounds
It's
like
been
me.
a while.
Sounds like me.
But yeah, so actual last question before we get into like discussion stuff, I guess. What are your guys' like all-time favorite books, regardless of like school games? Maybe it's a school book. I don't know.
I need to look at my...
I remember I remember what Fahim's answer was at the very least last time I asked this.
I forgot my answer.
I was about to ask what did you
I
answer?
forgot my answer. You
I
want
was
to tell
there
me what my
too.
answer was?
Yeah, you said the Maze Runner.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
The Maze Runner went so hard. Oh my god. I love that series.
that's
I love
funny.
that series. I watched the movies. You know it.
I just,
Uh-huh.
why do I remember Fahim's favorite book and Fahim doesn't?
No, you remind me. It was the Maze Runner, and I don't know if you guys know about this other series. There's a series called like the Testing or whatever. That was amazing. And then there was another series which is like Ugly's Pretty something and
Oh,
extras,
you
right?
read that?
Yeah, I read that, and like
What?
the post-apocalyptic genre goes so hard. Like I can't.
We were cleaning out our house today, and there was like a crate of books, and we were gonna like donate some of them and keep some of them based on like which ones we wanted. And I actually kept the testing. I had never read it, but that's interesting that you said that because I'll probably read it now. I didn't know if I was gonna read it anytime
It's
soon.
a good ass book.
All right, I'll look into that. And then I was like, because we had a box of all the Maze Runner ones, and I was like, one of the books is missing, and I see the Maze Runners on my bookshelf. Now I see why. Sorry, I'll answer the question in a second. Okay, I'll probably say there was this one book I read over the summer. Like, I finished it probably like a month or two ago. Called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. It's a nonfiction book, and it's about like this therapist and her situations with patients, and then the fact that she had gone through a breakup and had to go to her own therapist, and it's kind of just like an account of like her experiences as a therapist and like how she helped certain people and how she grew as a person because of like what she did as her profession. And I feel like it was honestly one of my favorite reads. It's called it's by Lori Gottlieb, called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, and I would recommend it. It's nonfiction, and they obviously changed the names, and I feel like part of it is because I like psychology and I've been interested in therapy, even though like I don't go to therapy or anything. But I just thought it was a really good read.
Yeah. Um,
I don't know if any of you have read it. Probably not.
No.
yeah, no, I haven't, but I'm really interested in picking it up now.
hmm I guess I have a lot of favorite books, but one of my most favorite books is this book called The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein.
Oh, and then that
It's
became a movie.
Yes, it's the one, it's the sad dog trope, but it's such a good book. I cried so hard at the end, but
Of
Mhm.
the
I
I
feel
movie or
can't
of the
like
do
book?
I can't do
both,
sad pets. I can't.
both. Fahim, the minute was like, or the movie was like 2 minutes in, and I was already sobbing because I knew the
Aw.
end.
I
It was,
Oh,
remember it was in the trailers or whatever, the trailers were coming out, and I remember how excited you were because I remember you said you
yes.
read it.
Oh
That's
my
the
gosh,
only
it's
reason
Yo.
I
such
never
a
saw
good
the
book.
movie.
Yo, Marley and Me. I don't know if any of you have seen that. That
Yes,
movie traumatized me as a child because I cried
yes.
so much, and I can't do sad pet movies because then I just think about all of my animals, and I can't. I just can't. It hurts me.
I don't think I've seen many sad pet movies, read books on them, like stuff
I
like
mean, I
that.
must say the book is better in my opinion than the movie. I'll be that snob, but like the book is so good. The end of the book, like if you read all the way to the end, like the epilogue, bro, there's a twist low key. It's just the whole book is sad and it breaks my heart, but it's an amazing book. And
Hmm.
I feel like the frame that it puts around life is very interesting and thought provoking. But other than that, I also liked Demian by Herman Hesse, which was like the last book I finished reading, and it's kind of like a philosophy book. It was pretty interesting. And then my favorite nonfiction book is called The Fortune Cookie Chronicles by Jennifer A. Lee. It was actually very interesting. It's about like the history of Chinese food in America because, like, Chinese food in America is not like legit Chinese food. And it explained like the history behind like how the fortune cookie got here. And fun fact, the fortune cookie is actually a Japanese thing. And
Whoa, interesting.
fortune cookies did not actually give you like good things. They were like kind of negative, because then once you heard the negative, you would change yourself to become a better person. It wasn't just like good things are in your
That's
future.
interesting.
So you're
Yeah.
telling me they were
This is-
misfortune cookies?
Yeah, exactly. But it was actually it was pretty interesting.
It's like a
But yeah.
Can I tell an
self-growth.
interesting fortune cookie story?
Yes.
So one time I was actually this was very recently. This was a couple weeks ago. I was really craving fortune cookies. So I grabbed two and I opened the first one and it was like, you will have a good long life ahead of you. And I was in a Discord call with a couple of my online friends, and I literally just go, no, I don't want to. And it gets better. I open the second fortune cookie, and the fortune says, try it, you might like it. And
Oh
I
my
just-
god.
What?
Yeah. And I currently have those two fortunes, like magneted to my fridge, because I thought it was so funny.
That's so crazy.
No, I don't want that. You might have to dispute that with Panda Express or something.
That's funny.
But yeah.
What are your favorite books, Karina?
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Okay, so my personal favorite book, like my all-time favorite book, is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So I think this book taught me a lot about like when to be on guard with my thought processes, avoiding intuition. It helped me like it. I guess it helped me hone in on a taste for the smaller details in both my life and my writing, because Thinking Fast and Slow is all about understanding how we make choices. So I guess it help me realize how we consider like rational functioning versus intuitive functioning, how to pay attention to those who listen to us, like many of the facts that the book talks about are subtle, but they help us understand how humans make decisions. And I loved reading it. It's long. It's 500 pages of straight nonfiction. Like it's a little dense, so I don't recommend picking it up as your first like nonfiction book. Actually, if you wanted like a first time nonfiction book, and if you're somebody like me who has like maybe confidence issues, I recommend Presence by Amy Cuddy. Her TED Talk is probably the most popular TED Talk on
What-
Ted.
the TEDx company.
Wait, what is
TED.
it? What's it about?
So Presence. Oh gosh, how do I even explain this? Have you seen the TED Talk, Brandon?
I don't know. That's why I was at that. I might have, because I watch a lot of TED Talks and then forget. But that's why I was like wondering what like the TED Talk and the book were on.
Got it. So literally the subtitle of the book for Presence is literally just like bringing your boldest self to your biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Give me a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. So it's all about like what your presence is, and it's about like owning, like literally that's the first chapter. It explains what your presence is, and how like you have to kind of like believe in your own state of self in order to like gain confidence, and how body language, like how other people's body language influences us, how our body language influences people, how our own body language influences us. Like she covers like slouching, she covers smiling, she covers like powerlessness, or how power kind of like sets us free, and how we can slowly inch ourselves towards becoming more confident people. And in the 11th chapter of that book, she says my favorite quote of all time. She also says it in her TED Talk, but it's rather than fake it till you make it, it's fake it till you become it.
Wow. Interesting.
Which I think is rather empowering for a self-confidence book, because you're not just faking it until like people think you're confident. You're faking it until you are confident in yourself, and then you don't have to fake anything anymore.
Mm-hmm. I think
Interesting.
I love that book.
I think I might have to read that sometime soon, especially because I'm someone who has like a lot of self-confidence issues and anxiety about like especially like social interactions and like public speaking and stuff
Especially
like that.
that. Especially that. And the reason I picked up her book in the first place was because of speech and debate. Because I know my freshman year, I was terrified to do anything of the sort. And picking up that book, like realizing just how much more I could feel myself speaking in front of a room when I pulled my shoulders back and kept my head up.
Yeah.
Like, it's... The feeling is not only a good stretch if you slouch like me, but also just empowering.
Yeah. Sounds really interesting. Sounds like something I would like to read.
Yeah, I think you'd really like it, Brandon. I really do.
Watch the TED Talk first, see if you're interested.
I will do that. I will do that after this.
And then I think my favorite fiction book is between The Great Gatsby and The Giver.
I read The Giver
Ooh.
recently. I got that for my birthday. I read that in like a day or two.
But the sequel to The Giver is also really good. Gathering Blue.
I read that one too because I finished both of them because they're not the most difficult fiction books. And then I have the other two. I haven't finished those, but I read both of those in probably like a week. I really like them too. So I would second that recommendation.
If you've never read The Giver, read The Giver. This has turned into a book recommendation corner, which is fine.
Book club.
Book club. Yeah, so I guess what I wanted to talk about is that there's a really short, like, research news article that was published in 2013 by Emory University that correlates, like, the things we read, like, how fiction actually, like, changes our brain. Because it'll activate sensory areas of our brain. And then you all took AP Psych, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Did AP Psych ever cover grounded cognition?
No.
Not that I could think of.
Darn, I was really hoping it did. So for anybody who doesn't know, and for you guys, grounded cognition, like, rejects the traditional view that cognition is computation on a modal symbols in a modular system, which, big words, don't make a lot of sense on their own. But basically, it's a theory that, I guess, like, all of the features that we know about cognition and stuff, whether they're human or not, they're shaped by whole aspects of ourselves, right? So model simulations, the state that our body is in, or a situation action that we do are all a part of cognition. And, like, the various features of it will include, like, high-level mental constructs, like reading a book. So when you read a fiction book, even though the author is kind of guiding you through it, you're still imagining that universe, and you're still imagining that world. And oftentimes it's said that you can find yourself embodying the main protagonist, which means it's a lot harder for you to get behind a book if you can't relate to or understand the main protagonist in some way, which is, I know that you all said it was the density of the text, but I do think that is another reason why it does make it hard for a lot of people of our generation to understand to or relate to Hester Prynne or the Scarlet Letter.
I'd never heard that explanation. That's really interesting.
Damn, I must have been going through it when I was reading The Maze Runner.
We'd be stuck in the maze.
I was going through it when I was reading The Art of Racing in the Rain. Oh my gosh.
Well, and I think that whole study and that whole idea kind of pertains a lot to why our favorite books are what they are. Because if you think about it, if you were stuck in the position where you had to escape the maze, like in the Maze Runner, or like if you were stuck in that situation, your brain starts to activate and, like, think of this scenario. It's just like, you understand that as these characters are getting to know each other, you're getting to know those characters. And as these characters are starting to escape, you're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and you're starting to learn more about how the maze works. So as the main character goes through the story, you do too. And I think that that is one of the primary reasons why we read fiction. Could any of us relate to what was going on in The Scarlet Letter? Not in the slightest. Could any of us relate to what was going on in Huckleberry Finn? Probably not. The Great Gatsby? Definitely not, because as far as I'm aware, we are all middle-class children.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you think about all of the fiction that has been piled on us for the last year, there was no connection that we could solidly build between ourselves and our like personal like neurological cognition to those characters, and it just made it, I think it made it hard for us to like the book.
I have a question for you really quick, since I know you're writing your own novel.
Yeah, I am.
Does this like knowledge about like why people like to read, or what these like things you know about reading, does it influence how you write, or like what you
Absolutely.
think about? I thought so. That's
Absolutely. So, I'm not going to name drop or plug my book because it's not done and I don't know when I'll finish it. But, I am writing a fantasy adventure novel, and I've tried to write a lot of other books in the past. I've tried to write a psychological dystopia. I've tried to write an adventure science fiction book that turned into more of a spy book, but that's not relevant. When it comes down to writing a fantasy adventure book, the world building is so important. I don't know if you guys have ever read The Lord of the Rings.
no.
I read The Hobbit.
Or The Hobbit, yeah. The world building is fantastic. But you get so absorbed in that specific universe. And I want that for my book, so I think I spend a lot of time detailing, probably too much time, detailing the surroundings of my the surroundings of my characters and the setting of the plot, because I've built an entire world in my brain, and I have to put it on paper in words that other people will understand.
Well,
And that's really hard to do.
Not simple at all.
I was talking to this about Brandon. I think that's really cool, having to like go through all those processes of making those decisions of like what your world's gonna be, what each character, like, does this character have a mental disorder or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and knowing what I know about that kind of like cognitive functionality that happens when we're reading, and the fact that you need to be able to see yourself in a main character, and I think that holds true whether male, female, or gender neutral or gender fluid. Like, I think that you should be able to see aspects of yourself in that character, like regardless of that. So like the main character of my book, I tried to pick a relatively neutral age group. So the main character of my book is 19 years old. So kind of like on the bridge of no longer being a teenager and still a teenager. So like it's essentially like teenage young adult fiction.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's
But, like,
really cool.
I think it's cool, and I think it makes sense, because if you think about it, like, books that are super long and detailed, like books like Stephen King, like how I mentioned earlier, having all those details is what makes it so, like, that's what makes it quote-unquote scary, you know? Because it's not so much like, oh, there's, like, blood and gore everywhere, but it's just, like, everything is so like eerie and detailed and everything. So yeah, it makes sense.
So yeah, I do, to answer your question. I try and use everything that I know, and I have at least 4 books on my shelves on like one of the books that I read that was really helpful was The 12 Fatal Flaws of Fiction Writing. So if you're a fiction writer, pick up that book. It's so helpful. Also, dialogue is really hard. Now I'm just complaining. But
I think that's like the really cool part about writing and reading is like in movies it's like so like simple to see, but in writing and reading you have to like think about all these things, like externally without like a visual, like necessarily like a visual cue to like understand that. So I
Right.
think like the intricacies of like writing makes that possible. It's just really like cool.
Did you guys read a lot as kids?
I did not do that when I was a kid.
Did your parents read to you a lot?
My parents did not read to me as much as they probably should have. But I don't want to bash my parents.
Sorry, not trying to call out your parents.
No, I mean, I don't think they were bad parents for it. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, like, they didn't read to me a lot, is
Right.
basically what I'm getting at.
Right.
And my brother, he read a lot more than I did. He still probably reads a lot more than I do. And I don't know if that's necessarily, like, because of, I didn't read a lot when I was younger, or just because of how I am as a person. But I'm trying to get into it more, and I don't know if me not starting as early as like other people has created like difficulties in that, but I'm starting, and I enjoy reading a lot more now than I did years ago.
Lily, Fahim?
My parents didn't read to me because they didn't know English.
That's funny.
My-
But did they read to you in Bangla?
Where are you thinking they get Bangla books in freaking America? Bro, what?
Well, I don't know. What if they had books when they were in Bangladesh or Bangladesh?
Yeah, no, they didn't bring books when they immigrated. No.
I see. That's that's funny.
I mean, my parents didn't, like, I have no memory of them reading to me, ever, just because they never
Well,
really had time.
yeah, that's always a thing. But there is a possibility that they read to me more than I know, or more than I remember, I guess, because like a lot of the stuff like that happens when you're like really young, you don't remember, very well. So they could have read to me more than I'm thinking they did, but I don't know. I don't think they read too much.
Like, I just remember the very basic, like, children's stories, you know, your
Mhm.
Dr. Seuss and all that, because we still have those books, so obviously they probably read them to me, but I mean, that's as far as it goes. But interestingly, I remember reading to my parents. Like, I remember in the second grade, like, when I was reading my AR books, I would sit out on the patio with my mom at like 7:30 or something, and I would just read the book to her. But yet I
Reverse
still
the
can't
roles.
read. I still can't read out loud. Like
I-
when we're in class and the teacher's like, "Lily, can you read the next paragraph?" I can't speak it.
I think it's like, I don't know if it's like anxiety in those situations, but it's a lot harder for me to do that as well. Like I just like
Yeah.
start to choke up, especially if it's like a presentation more so maybe that is proof that it's more like anxiety related. But when it's like something like I have to make and I know what I was gonna say, but I just like start to choke up even if I'm reading off of a piece of paper. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me think. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
At least you didn't lose your train to sneeze.
Oh my god, the train
Oh
of
my
sneeze.
god, that's the worst.
The trainer
thing.
sneezed. When I'm about to sneeze and someone go like pineapple, I'm like, oh my god, I'm about to box you right now. Like, come on, I'm not gonna sneeze now. Like, you really ruined my day with that. Like,
I've recently trained myself to try and sneeze as quietly as possible, just because of my friend constantly saying "good sneeze" every time I sneeze.
yeah, when I'm on like a call with someone, I sometimes mute myself when I sneeze. But like in public before like the pandemic even, like I would try to hold in sneezes, and I don't think that's a good habit because like obviously like a sneeze is trying to get stuff out. But I would be like, I don't want people to see me sneeze and have to say thank you because I don't know who said it because it's like so loud in my head when I'm sneezing. They're like, bless you. And I'm like, I don't know who said that. So I just say thank you out to the world.
That's what you're supposed to do. You don't like specifically say. You just say thank you.
No.
You just
Sometimes,
Just throw it
that
out there.
somebody is blessing you.
well, sometimes there's only like one person that says bless you. You know what's the saddest thing? When someone sneezes and then no one says
No one
it.
says bless you.
And I'm like, and then when it's like a popular kid or the teacher even, oh my god, everyone says it, and I'm like, I just sneezed and literally no one blessed me. Like, come on, dog. And it's so sad. I'm sorry, this is really.
I swear I have the most aggressive sneezes.
That's
I think
okay.
like that's one thing I got from my dad. Like my
Oh my
sneeze game
God.
strong.
I
Oh,
do
you about to get blown
sometimes.
away. No, I'm kidding. No, this
He
is
really
really
just said
loud.
my
This is really
sneeze game
loud.
strong.
Uh-huh. Sorry, this is really off topic. Um,
It's okay. It's funny.
yeah, I don't know how much we want to keep into this, but I think
I
it
think
would
we
be
should
fun.
keep it all. I think we should. So essentially what all of those questions and that like neurological study that I brought up was all getting to, like, it was all cumulatively getting to this. I can speak English, I swear. Um so what I was kind of like, the reason I asked you guys like what the last book you read was, to kind of input the idea in your head to think consciously about when you're reading and why you're reading. And if you can't remember or you don't know, that I don't think you're personally invested, as invested in reading as maybe somebody like me or Lily, who can remember, like, name drop the like author and title of the last book we read and when we read it.
Yeah.
So I started there with that because like why is that? Why are some people more invested in it versus others? And I mean, I personally was just trying to draw the connection to see if like maybe like the amount she read as a child maybe contributed to it or not. In this case, it doesn't really seem like it. Because there's like varying levels of it everywhere between the four of us. But it was really, as Lily said, as to why she doesn't read as much during the school year. And it's because, like, the four of us and a lot of other students are really, really busy kids. And we have a lot of stuff that grabs our attention. And so I think that our attention deficit as a generation
Yes.
probably causes us to read less. So people who are
Yes.
able to sustain their attention span for longer probably have an easier time picking up and finishing a book. Or somebody like me who literally has to get closure for things will have an easier time like getting through a book that's like had an impact on me. But we talked about this a little bit in the technology episode, is attention and like what technology does to our attention. But our attention span is shaped by the things that we do on a daily basis and how long we're able to dedicate ourselves to an activity. And because we're forced to switch activities so often, obviously, I think that's going to give us like a bit of an attention deficit.
Yeah.
So I think it's harder for a lot of people to sit through fiction books and craft these entire like imaginative characteristics within their head than a lot of people want to. Because like we heard it a couple minutes ago when Fahim was like, "The Maze Runner go hard." I love the Maze Runner. In the sense that like it's not that you don't like reading. It's not that there aren't books that you love. It's that where's the time? What book do I even read anymore? Like do I want to? Do I think about it? No. Have people recommended books to me? Sure. Would I like them? I don't know. But I think that rather than taking that mindset in particular, think about all of the books that you love. Like think about how long of an attention span that you have, or maybe what factors contributed to why you stopped reading. Like, is it because of school, like your schedule? Are you too busy to keep your attention on a book for that long? Because I think reading's really important. Reading does so much for our brain activity and for our knowledge and our imagination. So like our creativity, our cognitive function, like all of these things are just immensely like heightened by reading. I'm very passionate about reading, people.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of says a lot that we spent like probably 45, like 30 to 45 minutes each, in total, explaining our favorite books and why we love them so much. So And I think that can be said for like a lot of people. It's not that you don't like reading. It's just perhaps you can't you don't see yourself in the characters in the books you have to read in school, and those are the only books during the school year that you really have time to read. So then you think that you don't like reading because then you only really have like 2 months where you can read whatever you want. And then sometimes in that case, it's easier to get the instant gratification of going out with friends or watching a YouTube video or watching a show on Netflix than having to completely like invest yourself in reading an entire world and delaying the gratification of understanding the end of like the book's purpose until the end of it.
I think it's really interesting, like the attention deficit thing, because I feel like, I don't know if you guys have a lot of issues with attention, but I was gonna say I probably have this like smallest attention span. I like bounce from thing to thing, like when I'm on the podcast, when I'm not on the podcast, I just be thinking about stuff that's like so unrelated to what like I'm supposed to, like, quote unquote supposed to be thinking about. And I have said for years that I hate reading, and I think the connection that you were making from those two things and the correlation between them, I think it's like really accurate, and that a lot of the times when I say I don't like reading, it's because I'm thinking about all those times where I was reading and I lost my train of like thought, and I like just wanted to go off and do something else because my attention went from the book to something completely unrelated. So I think it's just such like a good, like, such an accurate reason to why we don't like reading and why we think we don't like reading.
And that's exactly what it is. We think we don't like reading, but that might not necessarily be true. So like when we had this conversation in the past, I remember asking you guys like what your favorite genre of books were, and kind of attempting to pinpoint like why that may be in like because of your personalities. So for example, if you're a person like Fahim who's really interested in current event kind of things, or like I guess kind of how the world works in a specific way, and likes books like The Maze Runner, then like dystopian fiction might be totally your jam. Or you might want to just read books that are all about like the current state of the world, or the events that we face as a society. Like for example, if he wanted to pick up a nonfiction book like that was totally kind of like relevant to what's going on in the world today, I would recommend A More Perfect Reunion, which is about race, integration, and the future of America, by Calvin Baker. Because I think that's a nonfiction book that is kind of like a testament to what is going on in our world today, and kind of like maybe a new perspective or a fresh perspective on something that we believe strongly in. But I think that it's always important to find the kind of writing and find the genre that fits your taste, because it's going to do so much for you in the future.
I agree.
And yeah, no, I think that's everything that I wanted to cover.
Go read.
Yeah.
Read, people. It's good for you.
Or don't, like me and Fahim.
Seems like I'm not reading a book after
you two
this.
could read a bit more too. Just saying.
If you
I
can
try my
dedicate,
best.
if you can sit down and dedicate yourself for 45 minutes to listening to us talk about random, like bouncing from topic to topic, you can read a book that actually has a purpose, like chronologically.
Hey, don't discourage people from listening.
I'm sorry, you can cut that out. I just gotta say.
Yeah, priority
Oh,
list. Listen to the podcast, then
wait.
That's it. Number one priority in life.
I can't say no to that, but I also can't say yes either. I'm passionate about both.
Facts.
Yeah, but actually, really quick, that does remind me. Audiobooks exist.
Facts.
That's a thing, people. Audiobooks exist. If you don't think you can sit and stare at pages for a long time, listen to them.
Or do them both at the same time. Have the audiobook playing and look at the pages. Then
True,
you
because
double stimulation.
that's another attention thing. You double the stimulation and you cut out at least half of the distractions.
I don't know if I've ever tried that, but other than in class, but that was the Scarlet Letter or something, or the Crucible, and I was like out of it.
It was the Scarlet Letter.
Yeah,
And the Great
audiobooks
Gatsby.
exist. Don't forget.
All right. So if you haven't heard my voice enough already in today's episode of the podcast, be sure to check out the other episodes we've uploaded on YouTube and Spotify at the Intersectional Podcast. Feel free to email us if you have any questions or fill out the contact form on our website. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter, which is the Intersectional Podcast, and at IntersecPod, because Twitter only has 15 character limits. And with that, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.